Welcome back to the Schmitter's 100 Acre Woods. So here's a few photos to kind of catch you up from part 2. So the first one was getting the blade made, here's getting the sled, and then getting the blade mounted on the sled along with the back piece that the actual cylinder will push on. Some of that stuff didn't get recorded. So here's the sled, I've got some bolts for it. So just getting all of the bolts put on. And you can see kind of how we went about putting the sled together, where it's 3 separate pieces of metal that we then bolt together. So here's just a quick time lapse of getting the bolts out and bolting it all together. So we had some temporary ones in there just to hold everything together, and now got some grade 8 bolts to put in just to make sure that they don't break under any stress that may be put on the sled. Then went through and just tightened everything up, and moving on to the next project, the next part of the project. Okay, so here is the I-beam with the sled. Next we need to determine exactly where the cylinder is going to sit. So we want it just above or right at center of the blade. So we have a couple of pieces that we're mounting on there, and then also getting this I-beam measured so that we can cut it off. But starting with getting the mount for the cylinder on the blade part. So Dad and I take turns welding back and forth on these supports just to keep the heat distributed on both sides, not to heat up one side too much and twist it. So he'll burn a rod and then I'll burn a rod, and we just kind of work back and forth. So then here's an initial test on hooking it to the backhoe and just running the cylinder back and forth. Just to make sure that the sled does move and that we don't have any issues, so this back of the cylinder is not supported yet. Okay, so this is essentially what it's going to be. Once we weld the back on, have that, it'll split and everything will be inverted. And it'll go on the bucket, and then we'll use the auxiliary hydraulics. Since we have some of the measurements done with the cylinder, we go ahead and get it out of the way so that it doesn't get sparkles on it. So here is a pretty big gap on the top. So here using a piece of 7018 as the fill and 6011 on the electrode. So it's kind of a similar technique to MIG welding, where you actually add a little bit of fill in as you go. So at these bigger gaps on that type of welding, on stick welding, it can be more difficult to fill. So it's a technique there. Then got the torches out and started working on getting some of the support pieces cut out. We scored it with the cutoff saw first to help get straighter cuts, and then use the torch to finish cutting it, just because it's a lot quicker, even though there's a little bit more grinding that needs to happen afterwards. Okay, quick update. So we cut the end off this one so we can trim this up and put it on the end so it's like that. It'll be where we mount the cylinder and everything. Cut out a couple of pieces to put on the angle for the blade. I'm going to cut this piece out so it can be the back piece that goes on the cylinder. And then we're cutting out some triangles that we're going to use as supports to stiffen up these corners. So essentially they'll go on there like that, to help stiffen up all these corners instead of just relying on these welds. So I'm just kind of going through, put some photos in. So this is where the cylinder will attach, Here's a few of the pieces. So we have the log end, the cylinder end for the supports. And then here working on getting the angle pieces on the blade put on. So these are going to create a wedge effect to help separate the log whenever you push through it. So again, just using 6011 to weld those together. And then after the initial weld, get a pass of 7018 over top. So let the weld cool, and then before starting again, just chipped off any of the slag that was still there. Took the grinder to it, and here's just kind of an up close look of that weld after it's done. And here's the finished product. So here's the sled assembly with the weld done. So this is part 3. Stay tuned for part 4 of this log splitter build, and we'll catch you next time.